All right, ready for a deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're looking at an exercise in discipline.
Intense stuff.
A soldier's firsthand account.
Yeah.
Right. And this one's set during a military exercise in Korea.
Right near the DMZ. Talk about a pressure cooker.
Every shadow could be a threat.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this account so gripping. You really get inside the soldier's head.
We meet Airman Stanley Sutton,
Stationed in Korea.
counting down the days until he can go home.
3 to be exact.
Ready for that freedom bird. But
There's always a but.
his supervisor, Chief Mathis, throws a bit of a curveball. Guard duty?
Not exactly the ideal last assignment. Especially during a major exercise like that.
Right. Tensions are already running high.
Yeah.
And here he is, stuck guarding an entry control point. An ECP. What's that? A 3-foot opening in a fence?
Miles from anything.
With nothing to do but check IDs. It just doesn't exactly scream high-stakes military exercise, you know.
It's a far cry from Sutton's usual gig. He's more of a tech guy. Stringing cable, connecting phones.
Keeping things running behind the scenes.
Right. So you can sense his frustration at being pulled away from all that.
But here's the thing. Even in that kind of mundane setting, he's incredibly by the book.
Almost rigid in his adherence to protocol.
He even calls out Chief Mathis for not having his ID.
Of all people.
Right. Like, what do you make of that? That level of, I don't know, maybe over-preparedness, especially when it seems like a simple oversight.
It's an interesting point, almost like he's overcompensating for the boredom.
Yeah.
He even talks about chewing gum, drinking instant coffee, anything to stay awake.
Or could it be something more? You know, like a need to prove himself.
To show he's not messing around.
Exactly. I follow the rules no matter what.
Even if it means calling out the chief.
In the middle of a busy exercise.
It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does. And then, of course, things go from boring to chaotic in a flash. A generator blows, plunging the whole site into darkness.
And remember, this is during a heightened security exercise, so everyone's already on edge.
Right. Imagine the scene. Red emergency lights cutting through the rain. People rushing around.
And Sutton, caught off guard, but still laser-focused on those protocols.
Demands to see Chief Mathis's ID. Right there in the middle of the commotion.
Which, knowing Chief Mathis, probably didn't go over too well.
Probably not. Although Sutton admits he initially thought it might have been part of the exercise.
Another layer of confusion in an already tense situation.
It really highlights the blurred lines these soldiers have to navigate, you know, simulation versus reality.
Absolutely. They constantly have to assess threats, make judgment calls on the fly.
And in this environment, even a routine exercise takes on a whole other level of intensity.
For sure.
Eventually, things settle down. Chief, ID in hand, he gets everything sorted. Eerie calm settles over the ECP.
Calm before the storm, perhaps.
The Sutton's alone again. Rain stops. All he's got is a less than appetizing MRE.
Setting the stage. Out of the quiet. A sound. Splashing.
Oh, man. Here we go.
Ragged breathing. Getting closer.
Adrenaline's pumping now.
And Sutton. What's his first thought?
Let me guess. Chief Mathis is back to mess with him.
You got it. And honestly...
Wouldn't put it past him.
Right. But as the figure gets closer...
It's got to be the Chief Rabbit.
This is different. Sutton shines his flashlight. Grim Korean boy, standing there, soaked, injured, terrified.
Okay, now the whole DMZ situation. It's real. You can feel it.
Absolutely. And this is where training kicks in. Instincts. Threat assessment.
Especially there.
Right, but it's more than just the location. Sutton can't place the uniform. The patch placement seems off.
Off. How so?
Almost like a target, he says.
Okay, so every detail.
Adds another layer of uncertainty.
Totally. But it's the boy's condition that's got to get to you.
Of course. Wounded. Cold. Alone.
So what does Sutton do?
He acts on compassion.
Interesting. Not exactly military protocol, is it?
Sometimes you gotta go with your gut. He tends to the boy's wounds, gives him water, even shares his MREs.
Wow. Trying to connect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Despite the language barrier. And, that nagging suspicion.
That it could be a setup.
Of course. That fear doesn't just vanish.
And the boy.
He's still scared. Never fully trusts Sutton.
I mean, can you blame him?
Not at all. Imagine being that young, hurt, in a strange place. It's traumatic.
No kidding. And then...
Just when you think it can't get any more complicated, the patrol shows up.
Oh, boy. Talk about bad timing.
The boy's reaction, immediate. He bolts.
We're back into the darkness.
Gone. Leaving Sutton to explain all of this.
To a skeptical patrol, I bet.
You bet. He's questioned, scrutinized.
And this is where that fog of war thing comes in, right?
Exactly. Even in a controlled exercise, uncertainty reigns.
So the fog of war, for people who don't know, it's like
It's about the chaos of war. Limited information, conflicting reports, you can't always be sure what's real.
And Sutton, he's dealing with.
The language barrier, the stress of the situation, the doubt from the patrol. It all adds up.
So even with protocols, rules, this fog of war can really mess things up.
Absolutely, and in this case, the consequences for Sutton. About to get very real.
He finally gets to leave. Off to that hotel, his taste of freedom. You'd think he'd feel relieved.
You'd think.
He's so close to home. But then, something in the hotel lobby.
A Korean newspaper, just lying there, open, and there's a picture.
The boy.
The boy. But the caption. It identifies him as a North Korean soldier. Shot, trying to cross the DMZ.
Oh, no.
And it gets worse. Sutton sees things only he would notice.
Like what?
The poncho. The one he gave the boy to stay warm.
Right.
The bandages still in his hands. Suddenly, those small acts of kindness
Take on a whole new meaning.
a tragic meaning. Sutton even says, I may not have pulled the trigger, but I should have done something.
Wow. Blaming himself, even though he couldn't have known.
It's that weight of responsibility. You try to make the right call, but what is the right call in that situation?
And he keeps asking that, right? What was the difference?
What was the difference? It's the question that haunts him. And I think it's a question we all have to ask ourselves.
Especially in those high-pressure situations.
Exactly. When you have to make a choice. With limited information, do you follow the rules or your gut?
And sometimes there's no right answers there.
Sometimes there just isn't, and that's what makes this story so powerful, so unsettling.
Because it could happen to any of us.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that even with the best training, the clearest protocols, we're all human, we make mistakes.
And those mistakes,
Yeah.
they can have consequences.
Sutton's story, it's a powerful reminder of that.
It really is. And, it makes you think. Makes you really think about those gray areas.
And maybe, just maybe, it makes us a little more prepared, a little more aware for when we face those tough choices ourselves.
Well said. And on that note, that's another deep dive in the books.